The following podcast contains opinion and commentary protected by the First Amendment and fair use. It may also contain adult themes, adult concepts, and adult language not suitable for children. Viewer discretion is advised.
Laura Owens gooses cooked for arraignment. You'll be booked, mugshot taken, finger scan, bond is set. Now that's the plan. In a court when she will sit. Felony charges aren't your shit. Rachel Mitchell has your name. You have no one else to blame. The game is set, the die is cast. Pregnancy fakers just won't last. Forging tests and faking docs. Soon she'll be wearing prison Crocs. You've got nowhere else to hide. Justice this time will be denied. No appeal will save your ass. You've got no tissue left to pass. The game is set, the die is cast. Pregnancy fakers just won't last. Forging tests and faking docs. So she'll be wearing prison Crocs. You've got nowhere else to hide. Justice this time won't be denied. No appeal will save your ass. You've got no tissue left to pass. Justice for Clayton, Mike and Greg, and other than that she's misled. Protection orders gotta go from the moon, but where he home. Femme, Fetal. She is a con and not your pal. She'll have you by the balls when the pregnancy calls. She's the Femme, Fetal. Laura Owens gooses cooked for arraignment. You'll be booked, mugshot taken, finger scan, bond is set. Now that's the plan. In the courtroom she will sit. Felony charges aren't your shit. Rachel Mitchell has your name. You have no one else to blame.
Welcome, everyone, back to your favorite cubbyhole on the internet yet again. We are here for part 2. Hopefully you've had a good week. Mine was crazy. It involved crazy people dancing on top of vehicles in which police had to be called and trespass warnings issued. It was wild. That's all I'm going to say. It was a bit much for me, as if Laura Owens isn't enough. But we are here for part 2 of Laura's interview on the Unmistakable Creative podcast entitled The Healing Power of Creative Self-Expression, hosted by Srinivas Rao. Yes, I know, the Clayton Echard Woodnick response written by Marcus Riesinger for Dingus the Douche Canoe and his bullshit filing to the Supreme Court has been issued today. We will get to that in the next episode. I want to get this one done. I am insistent for that, which we'll get right into it, I promise. Thank you all for the likes and subscribes, and thank you all for the notes you leave in the comment section. It's fun having some conversations with some of you, and keep it up. We want to get the word out and spread the good news that there are people still finding things to talk about with indicted felon Laura Michelle Owens. So have at it, share it on your Twitters, share it on the Reddits, do what you will. Enjoy. I'm not so sure Reddit likes me, but that's a story for another day. But let's get right back into this. This is roughly where we left off, I think. Hopefully so. She's starting to talk about making the podcast so that she could use it for her own self-improvement. Vis-a-vis manufacturing bad relationships. So let's go.
I really would not have had any interest in doing a podcast of my own were it not for an experience that I had in an abusive relationship that made me really try to figure out who I was as a person and have this obsession with trying to become a better person. And I turned to all these podcasts and books on self-help, self-improvement, and entrepreneurship books. I mean, just trying to figure out how to be a more successful and happy person. And it was from becoming obsessed with those things that I decided I wanted to figure out how I could put my own take on it and help other people.
So does that include falsifying pregnancies and claiming abuse? Is that the idea from all these books and things that we're consuming to generate content? I should think not. Not unless you're absolutely crazy, but we kind of think you are, at least in the metaphoric sense. But there we go. Now, of course, here we are at the beginning. Yes, I'm talking already. The usual disclaimers apply here. I will be talking as things go on and as I feel so inclined. So if you're tuning into this late in the game, you have been warned. We will be discussing as we go along.
Figure out how to get out of similar situations.
Well, so I want to go deeper into this. So one, I wonder how your parents' relationship influenced your own relationship choices. And I know when you wrote in, you said a lot of people are often in abusive situations without even realizing it. How do we even get in? How do you find yourself in such a situation like that? Because you don't seem like a likely person to end up in an abusive relationship.
I don't. And I've gotten this question a lot, and it's very difficult to answer because I don't know the answer myself. I can only speculate as to why. I think that I've always been somebody who has tried to see the best in people and has been very innocent in a lot of ways in terms of just thinking that people will do the right thing. And if you treat somebody well, that they're going to treat you well back. And in the situation that I was in with my relationship, things just seem to happen slowly. Things seem to change slowly. I became abused slowly. And so when you look at it day to day, it didn't seem like there was a very big change. But when I look back at it, I see how crazy it really was. And I wonder, God, how did it go from this great relationship or so I thought to something that ended up being almost deadly? And you really can't get the answer to that. And it's just so frustrating to try and even think about it.
The bullshit being spun here is just off the charts. We've heard interviews from Mike, we've heard interviews from Greg, and thanks to all the people who've commented and just refreshed my memory that, yes, Mike Maricini was the one in San Francisco prior to the Owens clan pulling up ties and digging up their tent spikes and moving to Scottsdale. So, but you will notice in her response here that she doesn't exactly answer the question so far. The question is, well, with your parents' relationship, how do you find yourself in these relationships? We sort of dance around it already. It's not a surprise, especially given what we know about her manufacturing all of the alleged abuse that happened in these relationships. And of course, this is the one where she claimed and alleged that Mike was choking her out and that she nearly died, for which there was zero evidence. But of course, this was what she told the courts fraudulently to get orders of protection. So this continues. And if we preface this with what she was saying of she wouldn't have started a podcast had it not been for this relationship, this ties in very much so with her narcissistic need, in my opinion, to use media to weaponize when the court and the judicial and legal system doesn't work in her favor. This is sort of her shame game. If it doesn't work, going to the police, and if it doesn't get the desired results of punishing a man the way she wants, trying to vexatiously litigate things, as was her propensity throughout all of these things, she goes onto media with her own podcast, with other people's media, and tries to absolutely berate everyone that doesn't give in to her demands. And unless I'm telling this too far ahead, and if I am, I will edit it and move it around, I think this is all reactionary. This ties into my opinion of her father and his behavior, which we can't see so much now, again, because of his ill health, his mortality is setting in. So we can't see his volatility, is my opinion. And it's also my opinion that because Laura can't punish her father because of the complication of family dynamics and the complication of love and abuse and all that stuff within family dynamics, that she uses her relationships as the surrogate. So, because she is abused, she becomes the abuser and abuses the next people down. And I think this is just all part of the cycle. She was abused. She abuses men because she can't fix the other things. She can't get out of the situation. These are opinions. These are just sort of theories. I think I've got sort of circumstantial evidence to back that up. But again, these are my speculations. So this is what I think the cycle is. And this becomes a recurring cycle because it's something she can't resolve. It's not something she's getting the right help for. When you have abuse and when you have traumatic situations, you need professional, licensed clinical help to deal with them, to work on them, to process them, to have the tools essentially to heal from them and give yourself the proper boundaries not to let yourself be a recurring abusee. It would seem, based on all of the talk that we've heard historically, that Laura's never done that, as far as we know. There's, as far as I'm aware, no records of her seeking proper licensed clinical therapy or psychologists or psychiatrists or anything of that nature. Now, there may be some other things in her past that we just aren't aware of, the royal we being me, myself, and I, but we aren't seeing the effort put in from a legitimate medical and mental health standpoint to actually get anywhere with getting over whatever it is that's causing these cycles of poor relationship behavior and perhaps choices. Now, maybe it was all her intent that she would try and fix herself vis-a-vis her relationships with a multitude of different guys. And when that didn't work, then it becomes this terrible thing, and it just becomes more of the cycle of abuse as she just keeps going through men and not fixing the actual problems. That's my hypothesis on this. It works for me. It works for me in where I'm thinking these people are coming from. But again, I say that not as anyone who practices in mental health or medicine of any kind. These are just my thoughts. But again, nothing forms in a vacuum. This sort of behavior, this cyclical behavior, in fact, has to come from unresolved something. And in my educational history, again, I studied some degree of criminal psychology. Some of these things get touched on: family systems, drug abuse, physical abuse, so on and so forth. I think these are just cycles. And I think Laura's the middle person in this particular cycle. And poor Mike Maricini was the first subject for which she tried to capitalize. But again, as I was trying to say earlier, she didn't go to the right places for help. She went to self-help books. She went to Tony Robbins things, all the wrong places to actually do the work in healing and in therapy like she should have done. This is all part of that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, so how do you even get out of the situation like that? I mean, outside of ending the relationship, because I know there are people, what I've heard even in COVID, like abusive relationships are really, really struggling because a lot of these people don't even have anywhere to go because of the current situation we're in. And also, what role did your parents play in helping you get out of this?
Yeah, that's what's really sad is with COVID right now. I've been really interested in hearing about how many women are struggling even more because now they're with their abuser all the time. And if they had friends who were maybe looking out for them and could see how their body language was and how they were reacting in person, they can't tell that on the phone or even in a Zoom call in the same way. Um, and I think one of the keys to getting out of a relationship like this is that you need to have somebody around you who notices changes in your behavior. I think that was something that was really key for me. Um, my parents actually did not know anywhere near the extent of the abuse until I was out of the relationship and I had gone to the police. They had no idea, but I did have a couple friends who knew and who were able to see that I was becoming uh, fearful, and in my relationship it involved stalking as well, and I was really paranoid about where the guy would show up. He was showing up at a lot of places I was at, and my personality was changing. So I think that was a real way for them to figure it out. Um, and I think that another really scary thing that I've thought about with COVID relationship, sorry to take it back to that, is I've wondered to myself, say these women do want to get out and they want to get help. I just don't even know how they would take the first step, because if their partner is monitoring their phone, or if they're reading their text messages, it's not like you can text one of these groups that can try and help you. I feel just so sorry for women who are dealing with this right now. And that's one silver lining to being single during all of this, I guess,
Yeah.
is that I don't need to worry about that. But um I think that I knew, if my parents were to know the extent of what was going on, especially with them living in the same city, they live like 15 minutes from me. I thought that they would try to, I don't know. I had this idea that they would try to force me to end the relationship, and I didn't want that. So I think
Ha 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 ha. There we are. I didn't want that. I wanted to manipulate this guy until he did what I wanted him. She wanted just mindless men falling all over her, taking care of her. A few things. The first thing that kind of strikes me just generally about Laura Owens, especially when she says she's talking about trauma and abuse, is how dispassionate and emotionless she is. I've watched countless hours in my history of watching ex-Mormonism content, post-Mormon content, of people talking about their trauma, and in some cases, people talking about their abuse. I follow a number of other channels that talk about people that escape cults and religious cults and other things, and absolutely everyone has a level of emotion trying to recall some of those things and looking back on them. Some people break down because it's so raw for them. Laura is flat affect, absolutely flat. It's like it's a business transaction. Well, I was abused, and then I went to the bank, and it was no big deal, and it just catches me time after time. Laura's flat affect. It reinforces for us that this is not true. Her perception of reality is false, and she manufactures stories and problems, seemingly so that it can just become a talking point on a podcast for which we sell lots of ad revenue. And without these manufactured abusive scenarios, we wouldn't have a show. The whole thing of nobody told me, and then her sort of take two attempt at fighting, what was it, JFC for somebody told me. How's that for rebranding? Absolutely no creativity. Anyhow, it seems like the entire thing is built on the fraud of these relationships. We have to have trauma and abuse and all these other things to overcome so that we can have something to sell on the podcast and collect money on all this ad revenue that we have from all these big companies that we got through mums and dadums, or dadums and mums. Dadums probably had more of the connection than moms, I think. That's, again, more speculation. It seems to be accurate, though. He was the big shot on the AM dial. She was just a lowly person that was once in a while on a microphone, is my opinion of it. It all seems to be theatrical. It all seems to be a sham. It all just seems to be made up for the sake of promoting oneself. It's uncanny. A lot of people talk about Laura being a cluster B personality disorder type. I'm not going to get into all that per se, because I think it's a multitude of things. I think it's a multitude of layers, everything from learning disorders and eating disorders and personality disorders to other sorts of depressive issues, some of which involve acting out and so forth. I think it's a whole ball of yarn of problems, and it's not just one thing. And I think it's going to take a whole lot of... she could be a case study in and of herself. She could be in a laboratory being studied by all kinds of people, I think. That's sort of my general consensus of who she is psychologically.
I think that's why I kept it private from them.
Oh, I almost forgot. That was another thing. Evidently, she was not living with mom and dad at this time in San Francisco. She was 15 minutes away. That's very interesting to me. What was the change? What was the change that got them to flee San Francisco? I think things soured in San Francisco is what happened, and we had to get out, so we fled to Scottsdale, and Laura saw some kind of opportunity to stay close to them for reasons I can't figure out, but we don't quite know what all those reasons may be. It's very interesting.
I still wanted them to think that the guy was really a great guy. I don't know why I did, though.
She doesn't know why. Okay, yeah, I know I'm piecemealing this up a little bit. My apologies for those of you who can't stand that. So she didn't want to tell her parents the full story, so she says. That may be true. But then she wants to make sure that parents think that he's still a great guy. I mean, what kind of psychosis is this? This is a weird form of manipulation. We're going to say he's abusive and does all these horrible things, and I was near death because he was choking me or whatever. But I want them to think he's a really great. Why would you do that? That's not normal. We know why. She wanted someone who she could abuse and manipulate and coerce and have them wrapped around her little pinky. That's what she was looking for. She just wanted to be a horrific person and just have some guy's balls in her purse for the rest of life. That seems to be what the point was. And preferably a guy who would take care of her and give her lots of money, supposedly. Not necessarily one that was famous, although that's sort of how things ended with Clayton, but one who was at least a substantive supporter. It's very odd. It's all just very odd.
So did you, just to clarify, you didn't want to end the relationship, or you didn't want them to tell you to end the relationship?
I didn't want them to tell me to end it, but at the same time, I was also in that abused mentality of thinking that somehow I had done something wrong and I deserved to be abused, and I was desperate to be in this relationship, which I know that sounds really messed up, but that's...
Well, it is, because this is a false victim mentality kind of messed up. That's why. You weren't abused. You have no evidence of abuse. You've never had evidence of abuse other than claiming things that you couldn't prove. But because they give orders of protection out like candy on Halloween, you seem to think that was a win. We know it wasn't. And hopefully throughout this criminal process, that after someone is sentenced, you know what, I should talk just a little bit about what Omar said on the stream today, reading the response to the Supreme Court appeal. Omar thought this would go to a plea deal, and he may be right. It's very possible. I mean, in the normal world of things, a criminal would take a plea deal and would avoid a full-on trial and all the horrific things that will result from not taking the plea deal and then being found guilty on all counts, essentially, is probably what would happen. And Omar went on to say that if it doesn't go that way, then something horribly wrong happened. Although we all want the criminal trial. We all want some reason to go down to Scottsdale again, or Phoenix, as I suppose it may be, have a nice tailgate party with some breadstick money and scones and whatever other lovely treats that may show up, and watch the whole circus. In real life, you want to take the best deal you can get, and there would be some back and forth going on. There may be some of that now. We aren't sure. We know that there's some sort of discovery process happening, but it's possible. It's possible that good sense may prevail and that she may take a plea deal. We don't know, but we'll have to wait and see. It could very well be that she may, and she may not, just being a defiant, pig-headed woman. I'm being nice today. The words may come out later. We'll see. I'm in a certain energy this evening. It is Friday evening, and I want to be a little bit chill. I don't want to get my blood pressure too high up there. We don't need that on a Friday night. We just don't. But here's what I think about if she does take a plea deal. I would hope, and I would think, that Rachel Mitchell and the county attorney's office will make her allocute. That is, she will admit to what she did wrong in order to take the plea. So that's what we hope to see.
That's where I was.
So when you come out of something like this, how do you heal? But even more importantly, how do you begin to trust people enough again to open yourself up to the possibility of something better? Because I'd imagine that, this probably has done a number, like going into any date, any situation with this as sort of your backdrop, it must create challenges that the average person doesn't necessarily have.
It really does. And it's actually been a real, I don't know, it's been a real journey for me since then. To trust people, like you said, it's been very difficult. And so what I try and do, I have this journal that I keep of just random moments of kindness that I've seen from people, to remind myself that people can be really good and they can be who I thought that this guy was when I first met him. And So, for example, on the day that I decided to leave the relationship and get help from the cops, who were, another story, not very helpful. When I decided to seek out help, I found just the absolute best in people from a women's organization, a women's shelter, who were so kind and helpful. And they said that there was going to be somebody else for me, and this guy was going to be somebody that I would look back on and say, "Thank God I didn't end up with him." Um, and so I'm so
I think they're all saying, thank God I didn't end up with her. I mean, Jesus. It would be interesting to go back and interview some of these groups and organizations and agencies and ask them, so now that Laura Michelle Owens has been indicted on 7 felony counts and is facing up to 33 years in prison for all of her charges, what do you think about what you told her several years ago, that this, that, and the other, whatever it was, depending on who it was, to whomever she may have talked to about? It would be interesting to know the response with a new and current perspective of who this woman named Laura Owens is.
waiting for that perfect one to show up. Still
Yeah.
waiting. But there have been, at the same time, I've had some relationships since then that have I mean, they've certainly been a lot healthier. I think that it's just been harder for me to completely let my guard down, but I know that's going to happen very soon. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm working on it.
I wanted to go back to what you said about the police not being helpful, because I've heard that this is the case in not just abuse situations, but
Mhm.
in numerous situations where law enforcement is effectively useless, even though that's their job.
Mhm.
And I mean, given sort of what we're seeing in the news with law enforcement, I mean, having had this experience, like, what kinds of reforms do you think need to happen for people not to end up in situations like yours, particularly in the case of law enforcement? Because we've had a lot of people,
Right.
who've been law enforcement professionals here, and I've also had people who've served time here. And the thing that you look at is just how screwed up the legal system is. Like, I remember we had a criminal defense attorney who became a chocolate maker, and he told me,
Mhm.
he said, people plead guilty to crimes they didn't commit all day long, because if they don't, they're going to end up with a much longer sentence, simply because they can't afford the legal protection.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
She's filing that away for future use with Clayton Eckert, I think. I'm going to have to file that away. There may be some truth to that statement he made, that some people take a plea who are innocent. And of course, yes, the system isn't perfect because sometimes things go sideways. In this case, that is not true, because we have the evidence. We have the evidence that indicted her. We have the evidence that convicted her essentially as a fraud. So this is not one of those cases. Of course, Laura, being Laura, would use absolutely everything she can to claim that she is a career victim. She is a monetized victim. It's been her career, just screaming the sky is falling while she's the one shooting stuff up into it. It's all her fault. It is her fault. Now, that's not always the case with people who are abused, but in this case, that is the case. How's that for an alliteration? She tries to capitalize on trauma that she manufactured. It's just the strangest business model ever. It really is. And it's unfortunate that sometimes the justice system does get it wrong, but I don't feel that's the case here. It seems to have gotten it right every step of the way, and I think it will continue to do so, regardless of what happens even in the criminal trial. But I don't think the criminal trial will favor her at all.
Oh, it's completely crazy what is going on, obviously, in today's world. And I think for domestic violence victims, it's really sad. And my experience opened my eyes up to what actually goes on when you go and contact the cops for help on your own as a young girl. I thought it would be one of these things where I would go into the police station and they would be saying, "Oh, you poor thing, we're going to go and get him and we'll help you in every way possible," and that I would be believed. And I had the absolute opposite experience. I showed up to the police station absolutely a mess. I was in tears. I was told I needed to fill out a form. I was the only person in the police station, and there were three people that were working behind the desk. And I'm seeing these officers who are just messing around in the background. And after an hour, I finally went up to the front and I said, "Hey, when is somebody going to come out and talk to me?" And they're like, "Oh, you need to wait." Well, I mean, what was I waiting for? So finally somebody came out, and it was some new cop who said to me, he read my form and it just sounded like the guy was an ass, and offered me a ride home. And I was really surprised by that. And more than anything, I felt really hopeless because I thought, well, if I'm not believed by the cops, then I don't have another option. I've done the most extreme thing. This is what I thought was betrayal to the guy. Um, this was me being vulnerable, and nothing happened, and that really needs to change, because you're going to have these victims who are going to be afraid to tell their stories and to be honest about what's going on, so they're not going to come forward, and then you're going to have more instances of injuries, both emotional and physical. I mean, there is so much abuse that goes on emotionally in these relationships that I think can be a lot more damaging than the physical abuse. And it needs to be something where we don't need to feel, and this is something I've really felt, is that there's an element of shame to being a domestic violence victim. Um, and not to get too honest here, but this has been something that I've had serious discussions with my mom about. Was when I decided to talk about my story, to say what happened. She said, "Oh, well, you're going to have guys who aren't going to want to go out with you because they're going to think you come with baggage because of this." Well, that's exactly what needs to stop, is people.
All right. I can't help it. I can't take it anymore. What an absolute entitled bitch of a Karen. Of an entitled Karen. I mean, this is insane. To just waltz into a police station, turn on the crocodile, "Oh, I'm being abused," without any case history, without any paper trail, and just think they're going to come in and haul off a guy because you say so. And then you want the system to change. I'm sure she was assuming legislatively, so that you could just waltz in and accuse anybody of everything and have the police do something for you. That's nuts. We don't work on your delusions, Laura. We work on facts and evidence, and you had nothing. And of course, trying to make the case that, well, the emotional scars are far more damaging than the physical. That's absolute bullshit. Now, that's not to say that the emotional damage can't be serious, but there's a big difference between being yelled at and being smacked around. Not that any of them are good. But what she is trying to do, she is undermining the idea that you don't need physical evidence to have cops take someone away and charge them with something. That's what she's trying to do. This is a manipulation tactic. Well, all the scars are on the inside. You can't see them, but he did bad things to me. Therefore, you need to take them away. That's the case she is trying to make, and it's a dangerous precedent. And it's an illegal precedent. And of course, it's the sort of precedent an entitled woman who's never been punished for anything she's done in her life would try to do. She would try to pass herself off as a victim to everyone and anything that she thought she could get away with, and make someone else's life miserable because she didn't get away. And as she said, this was the most extreme thing I could think of, or something to that effect. Well, of course, it wasn't. She decided to take things further by the time it came to Clayton Echard. But at the time, just going to the police and coming up with a sob story was the best she could come up with. But she spent some years and refined her plan to be even more extreme. It's frightening. It's frightening, the calculations and the conniving she was trying to do to get the system to work for her and to manipulate the system into taking a false report and trying to pass it off as something that actually happened. It's absolutely outrageous. And kudos to the officer for not just sort of taking it on a wink and a smile and a blowjob that the story she was concocting was real. See, this is the thing. Even in abuse cases, which is difficult for people who are actually being legitimately abused, there's going to be some case history, there's going to be evidence, there's going to be police reports of physical abuse. The thing, if it's really happening, is there will be police called. They will show up. They will do an investigation. They will take evidence. If someone's being smacked around, especially if it's very recent, there will be evidence to take. there will be a paper trail. It won't just be some woman showing up to the front counter saying, "This man is hurting me. You need to take my word for it. Go and get him." That's not the way it works, Laura. It's a pity you haven't enjoyed handcuffs quite to the degree we think you should. Maybe that day will come in the near future, we hope.
People thinking that this is baggage. Why should the women be feeling, or men can be victims as well, but why should the victim be feeling like they have this coat of shame to wear around because they tried to believe the best in somebody and were taken advantage of?
Yeah.
That's weird. It's weird, number one, that she tries to frame what Mom said, what Mother Owens said is, well, men aren't going to like you if you have this. That's bizarre in and of itself. But Mother isn't wrong on one level that not every guy's going to like you. And I don't think Laura in her thick skull understands that. She thinks she's the one that decides everything. This man's going to like me. I'm going to force him, or I'm going to take orders of protection out on him. Or if he doesn't do what I want, I'm going to accuse him of impregnating me until I get what I want. It's the whole thing's cuckoo. Oh, where's my cuckoo button?
Wow. So, I asked you about how you start to heal and trust people. What I wonder also is, I'd imagine this does a huge number on self-worth. And how do you begin to recover a sense of self-worth when you've gone through something that has been so damaging to your self-worth?
I'll answer that one. You go get a good therapist and you work it out. You don't go to Tony Robbins classes, and you don't just read self-help books, and you don't just listen to self-help guru podcasts. That's not quite the way to do it if you're going to do it the right way. But let's hear what crazy Laura Owens says.
I think, like I said, I watch a lot of TED Talks. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't have the answer for that yet. I do gratitude journaling.
Gross. See, this is all weird woo-woo, just nonsense bullshit. Okay. If any of you are into that thing, good for you. I don't think it's the way to go about it. Okay, fine. If you've got some certain practices that are meaningful, good for you. Bless you in that. I don't think it's enough if you're actually legitimately dealing with trauma and actual abuse. I'm just going to journal it away. These are a few of my favorite things. No, I mean, that's so Sound of Music. Raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens, bright copper kettles and warm woolen mittens, brown paper packages tied up with string. These are a few of my favorite things. It's ridiculous. It's immature. These aren't how you solve your problems as an adult when you've got serious problems to deal with. It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd.
I just think a lot of the healing process for this has to do with coming in contact with people who you can trust and who have your best interest at heart, and just realizing there are more of those than there are of people who are extreme abusers. And it's an everyday struggle. I know this because I've talked to other victims, an everyday struggle to try to move on from what happened. And I don't think there's such a thing as moving on completely. And I don't know if there really should be, because it's such a part of you. And I think it's given me a sense of empathy for people that I wouldn't have otherwise.
If you never move on completely, you are reopening old wounds. That relationships that don't go well, even if you aren't abused, I'm just talking about things that just, you're not compatible. Maybe there's something that's unresolvable and you just can't get past it. That can leave scars for a while. People who are stuck in that cycle of just continually not moving on from things obviously have problems of their own. They're not getting the actual help they need to resolve that conflict internally, or the trauma, or whatever it is that needs fixed. And they're not moving on. These are certainly indications of mental health issues. I mean, this is kind of the thing. It's sort of an obsessive compulsive pattern of just circling around and circling around. There could be some other things like ADHD. Like I said, I'm not a mental health practitioner, things like that, et cetera, et cetera. We're just picking away at the layer of onions that is this mess called Laura Owens. There's multiple things coming up here. There's so many things to unravel. Again, she could be a lab rat for all kinds of studies. It's just insane. There's a lot here.
Yeah.
This might be an odd question, but what do you think men who are just average guys like me who not abused anybody and have no intention misunderstand just based on what we see in news and like what misperceptions about domestic abuse do you think the media creates?
I think that, and this is what I'm going to answer this based on what I thought um, happened in domestic violence situations. I always thought that the woman was weak.
Isn't that interesting? To answer the question, she claims to have been in a violent, abusive relationship that she almost died from, but she has to answer from the perspective of not her own. There's no authenticity there, folks. See, hello. She's having to dig for other sources, even though she's claiming to be the same sort of victim. Ding, 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 ding. Hello. Hello, McFly. Wake up, McFly. She's telling us how she processes these things and how she manufactures these stories and where the sources come from. She's a fraud. She's a fraud from top to bottom. We could probably end on that, couldn't we? No, I'll finish it. I promised I would finish it. There we are. She's sourcing from other places to try and give her the tools to make these things up.
And I know that's what men think as well, is that the woman was weak. And people always ask the question, why didn't she leave? So I think that you have these guys who are wondering, well, if she's not damaged in some sort of way, why would she put up with that? Or is she a liar? Did it really happen? Because she shouldn't have stayed if it was as bad as she said it was.
Well, Laura, we know you are a liar. You've been found as such by a court of law. So case closed there.
And I think you have guys too who just think that, the girls are going to carry the weight of this for the rest of their lives and want to be a victim, or in my case, want to be an advocate for victims and be very passionate about it. And I think in a lot of ways, men want to show to their friends, to their family, that they're with this perfect girl who doesn't have a past, even though the past is what adds a sense of depth and wisdom and character.
Yeah. Wow. So this is another question. So I think that for me, it's funny because we're talking about self-improvement, listening to podcasts, and I just published this piece on Medium titled "A Skeptic's Guide to a Good Life," and that literally came from a conversation I had with a friend who
He published on Medium too. Interesting. I wonder if this is where she got the idea to tell her anti-Clayton Eckert propaganda sob stories on Medium. Could this have been the impetus for all of that nonsense? Ooh, I wonder. Does anybody know when Laura started posting her bullshit on Medium? Please put that in the comments below if you happen to have a date.
Described Unmistakable Creative as a skeptic's guide to a good life, because I don't just want to take things at face value and let people spout inspiring bullshit without anything to back it up. But I think self-improvement is one of those things that we resort to, and sometimes to a point where it becomes sort of just an obsession in and of itself that doesn't lead anywhere.
Yeah.
So one, I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that. But another question around this is, some people let their past inform their future. Other people let it define the future. Why do you think that happens? What do you think is the difference between those two people?
Yeah, I want to answer that question first. I had a thought about it. I think that the difference between informing and defining is what you decide to do about it, and it doesn't have to do with, was the abuse worse for the person who allows it to define them versus the one who allows their past to inform their future. I think that it has to be a really conscious decision, and one that involves so much bravery to say, I'm not going to let my abusive relationship be the rest of my life. Rather, I'm going to let it inform me. So I'm not just this naive girl like I was in the past, but at the same time, I do understand people better. I have my guard up. You learn to trust your gut a little bit more. And I've kind of done it both ways myself. And I did let it define my future for really too long. And that wasn't giving me great results. And to your other point, listening to a lot of self-help, a lot of it wasn't beneficial for me. A lot of it wasn't. I mean, I would have just people would make fun of me because I'd have a constant stream of positive talks and shows on. I mean, in my ear, I would be just listening on my AirPods while I was riding, and when I was home, I would just have YouTube on in the background, just speeches by Matthew McConaughey, just all these different things on all the time to try and just put positivity into my mind. But I think you really need to find one person who resonates with you and really focus on what they have to offer rather than just listening to a ton of people and getting confused, because they all really cancel each other out at the end of the day, or most of them do. I mean, yeah, they all have been through something that's made them passionate about wanting to share their message with other people, but just because they have a good message and they've had an interesting past doesn't mean that it's yours.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that, because I think that, I jokingly said, I was like, if I could actually incorporate every piece of advice I've gotten from a podcast guest, I'd be a billionaire. I'd have 6-pack abs and have a harem of women. But none of those things are true about my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So the thing that catches me yet again is her responses are so hollow and inauthentic. They're so empty. There's not much substance there, but she's trying to say the things he wants to hear. It's an odd thing to me. This is kind of like for me, this is an equivalent to having someone with a substance use disorder saying, well, I don't need to do anything about it. I just need to avoid the substances. And then they wonder why they relapse and relapse and relapse and relapse. And they just keep going in these cycles because they don't do the actual work. They don't get with a professional who can diagnose them and with a professional who will come up with a course and treatment plan. And in her case, that would probably most likely not only involve talk therapy, but a whole slew of medications. Never mind. I won't speculate on how many. I've got some opinions about that, but I'll leave them alone in my head. These are the cycles we're seeing with her. They're curious cycles. It would be interesting to have the opinion and perspectives of a psychologist or someone in the psychiatric field taking a look at all of this history and all of these stories and all of what we know collectively as the victims of Laura Owens / Justice for Clayton community, and look at who this person is and what would be the right way to go about dealing with all these problems that it seems she has. It would be revealing to me, I think. I've got my opinions based on my limited education and such things. But of course, we're trying to figure out the difficult things without actually knowing a person personally. And that's virtually impossible. And of course, remote diagnosing is not a thing. That's not a thing that any licensed practitioner can do. But we would be very interested in some of the opinions of what are all of the layers we have to work with here that need to be worked on. Because that's what she's missing. She's missing the self-awareness that she's got problems that need professional help, and you can't just turn on a podcast and fix them. Self-help podcaster, heal thyself is the phrase I want to say. You're not going to get anywhere. I mean, you may as well go to a faith healer and wiggle the fingers and go, if you just believe hard enough, you'll be healed. It's just nonsense. I mean, it just smacks of mental illness on its own.
It's
Yeah.
bizarre. And I realized at a certain point that when I was thinking about the people that I interview, that I had to take, what I could from each one and come up with my own recipes using their ingredients. And I think that there's so often this tendency, and I see this over and over and over in sort of the world of self-development, all of that, is to treat guidance as gospel, where we literally say, okay, this person has authority, this person is famous, this person has status. So what they say suddenly becomes more credible, and I should see that, absolutely as word that I should trust. So, anytime I hear the words "everybody should," I'm like, okay, right now this is anytime somebody says that, I think you should be skeptical, because there's nothing that everybody should do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that a lot of people that do have the tendency to worship these motivational speakers as gods. And to an extent, I have done that and continue to do to some extent with Tony Robbins. I think the world of him, and I've gone to a bunch of his events. But and it's all the information is super fresh in my mind right after the events and maybe for a couple months after. But then I haven't been to one of his events in a year and a half at this point. And I feel like what I learned and how strong I felt after has largely dissipated. And that's been really disappointing for me. And trying to relive what I experienced at his conference it doesn't help to just watch these videos online of what happens at the conference or to try to watch I Am Not Your Guru on Netflix. You can't really relive the moment. And somebody like Tony Robbins, that's not the answer. It's not just one person that's the
Yeah.
answer. I mean, I think he has a lot of great advice, and I do watch him more than just about anybody else. But at the same time, he's not God. And you're right. We do worship these people unfairly in a lot of ways.
Well, I think that we overlook the fact that they have character flaws, and this is why I had to ask you this as somebody who was, a victim of abuse in a relationship. When you see somebody like Tony comment on a Me Too moment, what do you think? Because I mean, I
I was
know
actually
that
there for
really got
that.
him about a backlash. Oh wow,
Mhm.
okay,
Yeah, I was there at that conference with that. And I do think that was taken a little bit out of context. I wasn't so struck by what he said and angry. I know a lot of women were, but I think when the video came out and everything, I think that woman kind of wanted her 15 minutes. I understood what Tony was saying in that it discredits a lot of people who really have been victims by everybody coming forward and saying that they were Me Too'd if they really weren't. And to say, like, okay, somebody who had their boss said that they look good in a dress or something like that, to say that's to the extent of what I experienced of, being suffocated and attempted drowning and everything. It's not the same. And so that's where I think Tony's point was also that having a victim mentality is not beneficial to have all the time. And I actually learned that from him and to the extent.
But yet, she tries to use that as a career, being a professional victim. She says that multiple times, not only in this podcast, but in other ones. I keep trying to take all these things that happen badly in my life and turn them into my Nobody Told Me podcast. What else is there? These are the things she keeps doing. And these are the things that are so unusual and so bizarre and just icky. Can I say icky on a Friday? Sure, why not? And then she goes to all these events, all of these seminars where she's supposed to be learning that victimhood is not a good thing to stay in permanently, but yet she keeps the wiring is wrong. The wiring in the head is wrong, and maybe that's just where I have to stop with trying to process why she thinks the way she does. And what was she trying to say about people in dresses? I mean, there was a lot of rambling, incoherent rambling at that, where she was just speaking. A lot of that just didn't make sense to me. So maybe it's not even worth discussing, and I should just move on for the sake of time.
That you don't have to have that happen. I think it's good. I don't think the victim mentality helps people.
yeah. Well, it's funny because you reminded me of a conversation I had with a dating coach that I worked with, Nick Notice, who's also been a guest here.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at the time we had him, like this was all starting to basically become very, very prominent in the media. And, his clients said that like he literally was having trouble because his clients were terrified even to kiss somebody on a date because they were so afraid. And he said,
Right.
the reality is, he said, if there's no initiation, he's like, you're not going to have relationships form without some semblance of intimacy. And that really always stayed with me because, and it even made me think back to like bad dates where I'm like, like many of my male friends, like, oh, we question our own behavior in certain moments. It's like, damn, was that a moment in which we could have been accused of something?
Right. And something that's made humanity so beautiful has been the fact that intimacy comes naturally, and maybe it doesn't right now with COVID and everything and everybody keeping their distance, and that's fine. But in the past, it's been really nice to spontaneously be able to touch someone on the shoulder or give somebody a hug and not question yourself. And I think that's been really the shame of the Me Too movement. And for guys like you and your friends, and that moments that really shouldn't be overthought have had to become overthought. And it just shouldn't be that way. And I think some of the best moments that I don't know, that I've had, even in my horseback riding relationship with my instructors have been when they've put their arm around me or they've put their hand on my knee when I'm on the horse about to go in. And it's been moments that now somebody would probably say, "Oh my gosh, that's inappropriate." But it just made me feel supported.
Hmm. It's interesting that as an equestrian, she talks about being touched, seemingly innocently, but we wonder, could there be more to that story than just casual, friendly, encouraging touch on the knee or on the shoulder, or a side hug? Could there be more there? Could there be something being not told there? Again, that's not an allegation, but her behavior suggests there could be some form of something that has happened in her past that has put her on the wrong foot in understanding what intimacy is and distinguishing intimacy from sex and from touch and from emotional connections. She uses that word rather casually and rather indiscreetly. Everything just kind of is intimacy, and we allude in this past case with Clayton Eckert that she tried to make sex intimacy, but we didn't actually use the word sex. It's her understanding of all of these very different but interrelated things is quite juvenile and very immature. It would seem that she doesn't understand on many levels what all these different things are and how they're interrelated and what are the distinguishing differences between them all. It's somewhat enlightening.
Wow. Well, let's do this. I want to wrap up something a bit more lighthearted. You host a podcast with your mom, and you mentioned part of what prompted this journey was the abuse situation. First, I have to ask you about the dynamics of hosting a podcast with a parent, because I think I would probably want to shoot myself if I had to host a podcast with my mom. We would just be arguing the whole time.
Right. Yeah, I think my mom and I had a lot of experience together because my mom and I we've naturally been close, and she and I have had this whole experience since I was 8 years old doing the horses together, and since I was 16 having a business together.
Laura is Mama Owens' favorite. I'm going to keep saying it till people start saying it with me. That's just the way it is. The horse thing was Mom and Laura's thing. Sarah was kind of the third wheel, I think, for a lot of things. I think a lot of the things she says she was shy about I'm just going to keep saying that it's not as true as she pretends. Some people were saying in the comments, "Oh, yes, she was shy." I'm not buying it. I'm still not buying it. You don't go and do some of the things you do so publicly, and like sports, like any sports. And I'm fair enough that I can call equestrians sports people in a certain regard. Yeah, there is some physicality. You have to understand what you're doing. You have to have some investment in time and getting to know your animals and what you're doing. All of those kinds of things. Mom was very involved in the horses with Laura and other things, and in the podcast, and in real estate. How much more convincing of everyone else do I need to do? I mean, this should be relatively obvious that Laura is Mom's favorite, and we kind of wonder why. Are they just two peas in a pod? That may be. Is Mom trying to sort of cover for some of the problems in the family dynamics? We're not totally sure. There is a definite closeness and a definite loyalty factor between the two of them. They try to cover for each other, and we kind of wonder why it's that sort of dynamic. But again, as I said in my last episode, I don't see a great deal of affectionate behavior from Mother Owens. And in most of the stories that Laura's told, I don't really get that sense of affection. I don't get much of that loving closeness that one would expect from such a close-knit relationship. Just the word choice and the interactions, everything seems to be very, very low emotionally IQ. And maybe that's just the whole thing with the family Owens. Mom and Dad don't have very good, mature emotional IQs, and neither do, well, at least Laura. I can't say for Sarah. I don't know much about her other than what she does and some of her on-the-surface involvement historically with Laura and them bearing their souls to each other, or at least Laura bearing her soul to Sarah. But as far as the trio, Ron, Jan Black, and Laura are concerned, I'm not getting any warm fuzzies in how they interact with each other. It just seems like they're three people of different age groups, and it's all very transactional, and it's all very cold and sterile. Not feeling the love. Not at all.
So we knew how to work together, but I have to be honest, it was not my idea at the beginning to work with her. I wanted to go and do a show, but I actually tested it out with a couple of male co-hosts. And then my mom said to me, I think this would be a really interesting dynamic, and I've wanted to get back into broadcasting. So why don't we try this? And for the most part, it goes well, and that we have our own roles with the show, and we don't really step on each other's toes, and we know those. But to say that it's like a seamless process would be a complete lie. And I certainly have times when I get very angry and um, at her, and it's difficult. But luckily, at the end of the day, we both have the same goal of just really wanting to bring a message of hope to people, and being really on the same page in terms of the goal. So it ends up working out well, but it's not the easiest.
Okay, well, I'm not going to let you off the hook that easily. What are the moments of what are the things that have caused conflict between you guys?
I would say, God, I'm gonna just say what has bothered me, and that I'll be
And then your
saying to
mom is
her,
going to
like,
listen to this.
and then yes, exactly. She has her own side to this, and she really should. My mom is wonderful with responding to emails and outreach, and really doing things that, quite frankly, I don't have the attention to do. I have ADHD, and I'll be somebody who will reach out, and then I'll get a response. But then when it comes to booking times and everything, I get overwhelmed and I don't follow through as much. And so she's great with that. But then I'll get angry with her if I feel like I'm spending too much time editing a show or working on social media, um, because that's something that she doesn't do now. So it really just has to do with the role division. And again, I would say it's more on my end. My mom has so much patience, and she is such a veteran in broadcasting and has won all these awards and everything that
Bullshit. Bullshit. Prove it. Prove the awards. Veteran my ass. The only thing she's a veteran at is being tied maritally to Laura Owens, who did get some awards. I'm not seeing any awards hanging on any walls at, say, Jan Black, Elizabeth Naylor Owens. Come on. Stop trying to sell. Why are we trying to sell mom? I mean, this is sort of a weird reversal in my head of, Laura's such a narcissist to sell herself, but now she's trying to sell what her mom did. Oh, when will the weirdness end? It may never end.
I really can't get mad at her for anything she does wrong, because she's so much more experienced than me. But it's a mother-daughter thing. I mean, I have to try as the daughter, right? I get under her
Yeah.
skin a little bit.
So I have to ask, as the daughter of somebody who has won all these awards, do you ever feel at moments you're kind of living in a shadow?
Why doesn't he ask which awards? Why didn't he put her on the spot? Is he that enamored with her that he couldn't ask? Well, what were they? When? I mean, I would have. I would be curious. I mean, it's like, well, I'll just let her off the hook. Oh, she's won awards. Come on.
I have, and I've certainly felt that with my dad too, because his career has been more relevant in my life. My mom quit her job to be a stay-at-home mom when I was 6, so a lot of the stuff that she won, I wasn't really aware of at the time. And whereas with my dad, I've gone to a lot of these events that my dad's been getting awards at, and so I do feel like, to an extent, there's been that, especially being the daughter of both of them. I get that all the time from people at the station with my dad, that I don't really feel like I have my own identity necessarily. I'm Ron and Jan's daughter. Um, and that's been something that I think has motivated me more than anything, to try and create my own path and say, hey, I'm not doing this and just because my parents have been successful in radio and broadcasting before, that what I'm doing is really unique to how I feel about the world and how I feel I can best contribute to people. So I think with more shows that we've done, and now we're close to 300, I've started to feel a lot more comfortable in my own skin, and I have a lot more belief in myself.
Yeah. So you mentioned a sister earlier, and there's no way I wanted to get out of this conversation without asking about her. Like, what role does she play in all of this? Anything, or does she just listen and kind of watch you guys from the sidelines and laughing?
She is the best. We've had her on a couple times, and she's absolutely my confidant. And she's really into motivational, you know, videos and books as well. And she's amazing. She has a huge job in advertising, but on the side, she's also trying to become a personal trainer just because she really wants to help people with their appearance, and looking better means you feel better on the inside. So she has the same basic message. She just conveys it in a different way. But she has said many times that she thinks it would be very difficult to work um, the three of us together. We thought at the beginning it would be great to have all of us do it, and I don't think she could do it. She doesn't have experience working with my mom in the same capacity for so many years. Um, but you know, she's just wonderful. She has helped me so much through the issues that I've had with my relationship, with my abusive relationship and relationships afterwards, and has helped me become somebody who feels like they can help other people. So it really is very much due to her.
So, two final questions.
Before those final questions. So we learned that Sister Sarah is the confidant. Very interesting. And of course, that was corroborated in the previous body cam footage where Mother Owens was saying that Sarah and Laura talk a couple hours every day. I think her role will be very important if a case continues and it goes to trial and there are witnesses and there are people testifying. Because I think if a defense attorney were trying to keep Laura off the stand, which would be the smart thing to do, we would be bringing in family members to speak to Laura's character and trying to bolster that in a positive way. But then all of the things that Sister Sarah knows would be subject to cross-examination. And if she's the confidant to the younger sister, Laura, she probably knows absolutely everything that's ever happened in Laura's life. That could be some very revealing stuff on that phone. Voicemails, texts, conversations, anything else. There could be a lot. There could be a lot of history waiting to be uncovered that may have been deleted from Laura's phone or phones and or devices. So the key to other things may in fact be with Sister Sarah. That's very interesting, isn't it?
One, what role have the people that you've gotten to speak to played in your own healing? Because I can honestly tell you, I'm a very different person 10 years after starting this show than I was when I did. And, you know, like it definitely changed my values. It changed the way I thought about the world. So I wonder, in what ways has your own creative work changed you and helped in this path to healing?
Our show was started on the basis of trying to figure out how people got through their tough times. So I think that I've been really helped by just realizing that successful people had struggles, since on the surface it seems like they've just been successful, they haven't gone through anything. And so to see people display themselves, warts and all, has really me become uh, somebody who has a better understanding of people. And it's interesting that you say you're not the same person as you were before, because I feel that same way, that just having in-depth conversations where people really bare their soul gets you to know just the world and who we are, and that people have so much more good to them than we give them credit for. And I think it's really easy when you've had a negative experience with a person, and it doesn't have to be an abusive relationship like I had. I mean, it could be a bad upbringing or you know, depression or something. It's really refreshing to be able to hear a podcast where people, you know, you're hearing people talk more than just in a 2-minute interview, and they come off as real. I think that
Yeah.
it's more relatable.
Hmm. Well, I want to wrap with my final question, which is how we finish all our interviews at the Unmistakable Creative. What do you think it is that makes somebody or something unmistakable?
I think it's not being afraid to show your scars. I think that that's something we are all really struggling with. I think that the pandemic has made us all rethink the fact that we need to show appreciation for our fellow mankind here. But I think that we need to remove the stigma of victims being, I mean, we so have with the Black Lives Matter movement, victims don't have something wrong with them. The shame needs to be, I'm thinking back to Brené Brown and everything I learned from listening to her for so many years. We just need to remove the shame. We need to be proud of who we are and encourage each other to be the best versions of ourselves that we can while also being genuine. And that's what makes somebody unmistakable.
Amazing. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us and share your wisdom and insights with our listeners. Where can people find out more about you, your work, and everything that you're up to?
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's been such an honor to talk with you as somebody who's been a longtime listener. And you guys can find out more about the show that I host with my mom, Nobody Told Me, at nobodytoldmeshow.com. And you can check out my personal Instagram, which is Laura M. Owens. And yeah, you can keep up with us on every platform. Very active.
Awesome. And for everybody listening, we'll wrap the show with that.
All right. That's enough of that. That's enough of the bullshit. And of course, what Laura was really trying to say at the end there was, I want to make it so that when I want to claim to be a victim, that people will just believe me. They won't need to see any proof of it. I don't need to share anything with anyone other than just tell you that, and you'll listen to me and you'll do what I want. That's really what she was saying there. At least that's my opinion of it. And again, I'm entitled to said opinion, especially on a Friday evening. And we're trying to be a little bit chill and not get too excited. But there you go. There's her interview on the Unmistakable Creative podcast with Srinivas Rao. Lots of interesting little things there. And of course, we hit on things as we went. But overall, what are your thoughts on how she presented herself here as opposed to how she presented herself towards the end as she was appearing with Dingus the Douche Canoe, where really I think she was more of a stool pigeon when he was bloviating on his own YouTube page. And rumor has it that David Dingus the Douche Canoe Esquire has, let's try that again. And rumor has it that David Scott Gingerbread Dingus the Douche Canoe Tramp Stamp Lawyer Esquire has in fact turned his Twitter back on. I have not confirmed that yet, so that's just a rumor so far, but I have heard those things in other lives today, so I would think, given the trustworthiness of the people involved, that is true, but I will have to go and look and see if there's anything interesting to look at. Thank you all again for joining us here in the Cubbyhole. For our next episodes, we will touch on the court filing, the response from Clayton Echard to the Supreme Court and David Dingus the Douche Canoe. I think I should hit it just for old time's sake, don't you?
The fucking douche canoe.
There we go. In our future episode, we still have the failed country music career of Laura Michelle Owens. We still have a song waiting to be debuted for that, and not to let the cat out of the bag. I am anticipating yet another defeat at the Arizona Supreme Court. We have a song for that too. So we have 2 songs to premiere coming up. So stay tuned here to the Cubbyhole for all things Laura Owens for this point in time. And again, for all of my regular subscribers and viewers, if you have other cases you think I should take a look at, be sure to leave them in the comments below. And as we are waiting for the criminal trial of Laura Michelle Owens to suss itself out, or if she tries to take the easy route and take a plea deal first, we'll have something to fill that time with, which would be great. So let us know in the comments below. And be sure, hit that like and subscribe. Your fingers aren't broken. Clickety-click. And be sure to share these videos with whatever platforms you care to share them on. Thank you so much. And we'll be back later this weekend, or maybe at the beginning of next week, depending on my production schedule. Until then, everybody, be good. Or don't. It's your choice. See you next time.
Why do we have to, every time Rachel says something, you're just like, oh, you're not listening. It's just like, I don't get it. She is listening. She's listening to every word you say. And she's presenting something, and then you come back and shake your head and sigh.
Okay. Anyway.
Submit to an interview.
Wow. Stop. Well, if you let me. We're moving on to the next question. We're not gonna get very far with that. So
I can prove that this is not the first time she's done it. But even if you disagree with me,
I felt like I was juggling a flaming chainsaw while having my leg bitten by a German Shepherd. Okay. right, we're moving on to the next question.
What lawyer ever says that?
Well,
Yeah.
you're welcome that I gave you that's such an easy way to roast me.
Allegations, you know it's a possibility you might not win something. We're talking about the
There's
appeal.
no chance you lost this appeal.
Yeah.
And you will have this.
Rachel, here,
Ever.
can I offer you like a cookie or something? What do you want me to say? What do you want me to
Not
say?
that. In our case, we like our case.
I shouldn't have said that. Can we move on? Okay.
Yeah.
Pull it up. These
Okay.
statutes were invoked.
Yeah. Okay. Hang on. You're getting. Okay.
But show me a case that says that, because your cases don't. I've read them all now. Just give me a quote from Holgate.
Oh,
Just give me a quote from Holgate. That's
can you hang on? Can you hang on for just a second here? Okay. Lord. Okay. You are pretending. Wait. If you want me to stay on this, you need to let me have fair opportunity to answer. Okay.
David, of 58 minutes, you've probably talked for
times more than I
42
have.
of them. I mean, come on, man.
Okay, guys.
Hold on.
Let me.
I got the
Rachel.
case somewhere.
Oh
There's
God.
only the Rule 11. Hold on. There's other authority. What was at issue in that case?
We gotta move on. We gotta move on from that.
So, is the whole point? Try to withdraw it. There were other issues before the court.
Oh, for God's sake. Okay, Steve, can we move on? Because we're not going to get.
And then you come back and shake your head and sigh.
I know,
Because
but
you don't have any authority to infringe his copy or whatever that I interfered with his.
way before my time, way before I was there.
Way before you there. Where are these children?
Okay, you ready?
Where are they, David? This is the one thing that I think everybody wants to know.
Okay,
She's still 6 months pregnant. Can I show my belly? How would she have a belly in November if she miscarried in July or August?
look.
It's still not appropriate for her to include that finding of fact. Where are the people? There were reasons that her findings would have been inadmissible. That
My Lord, Steve. Oh my God.
And then Rachel gets 5 to 10 seconds before you sigh.
read the emails with Clayton, the emails with Greg, the text messages with Mike. 5 that it is, but something that purports to be.
Whatever.
If you would have won, I mean, obviously, if you would have won, you would have gloated too.
Here, sign something saying that you raped me, that Laura was pregnant. I don't know what that would be. I mean, she's been running around subpoenaing things, apparently.